All right, guys. Good day, guys. So, welcome back to my channel or my page, depending on where you're watching from. Special shout out to you, special regard to all of you out there. So, in my last video, where I talked about the concept of preventing unnecessary API call by using the native browser API call the abort controller, I did make mention of something called the cleanup effect. So I said I was going to make a video explaining what the cleanup effect is. So today we are going to look at one of the most misunderstood part of React, and this is something I've seen a whole lot of beginners in React neglect or might not have any idea about. So I thought of just putting this out today for some of you who have not come across this concept before. So by the end of this video, you will know what exactly a cleanup function is, when it runs, and a real life example of how to make use of it. Okay, so just stay tuned with me and let's get started. All right, guys. So before I will go further into what a cleanup function is and all of that, I'm simply going to show you a problem with this application right now, and then we see how we can use the cleanup function to fix that. Okay, so here's the thing. So if you look at the title of this site or the title of this application, you can see it right there. So it says recipes finder, find all your recipes in one place. So that's the default title of this page or the default title of this application. But now here is the thing. So when a user clicks on any of these results, okay, so let's say I click on this. Now you can see the full details of this recipe here. So the name of the recipe and all of those information like so, and the title of the recipe. So the thing is that as soon as the user clicks on any of this recipe, okay, the page title will be set to the title of that recipe. So you can see now the page title have changed to the title of this particular recipe here, right? Now here is the thing. So if I remove this component, so if I unmount this component now, like remove this recipe details now, you see what will happen. You see the page title still maintain the title of that recipe even when the component have unmount, you understand, and that's not nice. I don't want that. So I actually want it such that once the recipe details component unmount, the page title should go back to the default page title. Okay, so how can we do that? All thanks to cleanup function. So we are going to make use of cleanup function to see how we can fix that. Get the problem, right? So the issue right now is that once we set the page title all thanks to the recipe details component, and we unmount that component, the page title still retain the name of that recipe instead of being reset back to the default one. So like I said, we are going to use the cleanup function to fix this issue. Okay, but before then we have to go back to understand what exactly is a cleanup function. Okay, so let's look at what a cleanup function is. So a cleanup function is a function that can be returned from an effect. You can see the optional, and I use the word can because it is not a must. Okay, so a cleanup function is not something that it's a must have. Basically, a cleanup function is simply a function that can be returned from what an effect. So basically your use effect. But now it's optional because it is not in all cases that you want to make use of a cleanup function. So like I said, at the end of the day, you get to find out when you should make use of one. So this is the definition, simple and straight to the point. The cleanup function is simply a function that can be returned from an effect. Now, the next thing is, when does the cleanup function run? So at what point and then does the cleanup function actually get called? Okay, so that's what we are going to see now. Now, the first thing is that basically a cleanup function runs under two scenarios. So the first scenario is that it runs before the effect is executed again. So basically, whenever there's a state or prop, whenever the state or the props in the dependencies array change, and the effect is about to be executed. So before that effect is executed, we have to first of all run the cleanup function to clear off the previous effect, then it will run the effect again. So that was why I have to make use of it in the last video to cancel the previous HTTP request before making the new one. Okay, so it runs under two scenarios. The first scenario is that it runs before the effect is executed. So whenever there is a state change, or whenever the state or the props in the dependency array change, the effect is about to be executed again. But then before the effect is executed, the cleanup function, we have to first of all call the cleanup function to clear up the previous effect. So that's one. Then the second scenario is that it runs when the component unmount. Okay, so when the user navigates away, so like for instance, like when I unmount that recipe details component, it is expected that the cleanup function should run again, or whenever the component is removed from the DOM, so the cleanup function can run again. So with this, we actually have the full life cycle of a component covered. So meaning we can do something when the component mounts, and we can equally do something when the component unmount. Okay, so that's the two scenarios where a cleanup function runs. So first it runs before the effect is executed. So before all the actions you have on inside your use effect will run, the cleanup function will first of all clean up the previous effect, and then before the effect will run again. And then it also runs after the component has unmount. So when a user navigates away, or let's say the component was removed from the DOM, so the use effect will get fired up. So when do you now use it? Because remember I said it's an optional something. So a cleanup function is an optional something. So the question now is, when should you use a cleanup function? So a cleanup function is needed when a side effect continues after a component re-renders or unmount. So like in the case of what I just showed you now, the components that created that caused that page title to change have unmount, but that effect, okay, is still there on the page. So whenever there's an effect that the component created is still there on the page and you don't like that, so it's then the best solution is to make use of the cleanup function to fix that. Okay, so the cleanup function is needed when a side effect continues after a component re-renders or unmount. So sample use cases. So these are some of the cases where you might want to make use of a cleanup function. So things like to cancel a HTTP request, like we did in the last time. You cancel a subscription. You want to cancel a timer. So let's say you have a component that created a timer. Let's say set interval. So let's say you have this variable that was set to, let's say, 60, and you are decreasing that variable by 1 after every 1000 milliseconds. So if the component that created that timer is unmounted, it doesn't mean that that timer is out. That timer is still there. So if that component will mount again, another timer will be created again. So you find out that the rate at which that variable will be decreased will be very rapidly. Okay, so to be very fast, because now you have a whole lot of timer that is basically decreasing that variable. And the same thing happened for event listener. So if you had an event listener on your page and you didn't remove that event listener, so basically clean up that event listener when the component unmounted, if you mount that component again, the another event handler will be added. So you end up having multiple the same event listener being added on one element and all of that. Okay, so this is just what a cleanup function is. So now we'll head back to the codes to fix that issue that I showed you earlier on using the cleanup function. Alright, so we are back to the code. So this is the recipe details component. So basically, like I said, when these components mount, what I'm doing is to make an HTTP request to get the full detail of that particular recipe. So you can see this way I'm using this use effect to make that HTTP request. Then I'm using this other effect to set the page title using the title of that particular recipe. So the goal now is to return, like I said, a cleanup function is simply a function that can be returned from an effect. So the goal now is to return a function here I'll simply return a function here, an arrow function, and then in there I'll set the page title back to what it was. So let me just grab that here. All right, so with this now, so like I told you how the use a cleanup function run. So it will basically do what run on two different scenarios. So whenever the one of these states or props in the dependencies are reaching, so the effect will run again. So basically this is the effect here. But the thing is that before this effect will run, this guy will first of all, the cleanup function will first of all do what's run. So to clean up the previous title that was there. So you get the point now. So with this now, let's head back to the result to see if that issue has been fixed. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is simply to refresh the page. So let me just refresh the page to see. So let's wait for it. Alright, so I'm going to click on this to see. So you can see the page title has been set again to the title of the current recipe. So let's unmount it in the component and see what happens. You see it goes back again to the default title of the page. Yeah, so with the help of a cleanup function, I was able to achieve this. So I hope you learned something from this video. Please, if you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, and stay tuned for more videos. I'll see you on my next video. Thank you. Bye.